have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over.
Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is another live edition of Anomaly Now, straight out of Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Miles Lewis, and it is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, 7/24/24. And I really appreciate you joining us, whether it's live or pre-recorded. Do the usual, like, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff. Spread the word, the gospel. No, it's not that. Oh, wait a minute. So, there's several things I didn't get to cover last week, or I forgot to cover, that I really want to include note of. Of course, if you don't know about us, you can go to anomalyarchives.org. That is our website for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives. And we have been here in Austin, Texas since 2003. And our mission and goals are the preservation of UFO, paranormal, all anomalous material, particularly the files and personal libraries of seekers, researchers, experiencers, the whole gamut of people enmeshed in the various communities that represent paranormal research, UFO research, UAP research, etc. So over at the Flipboard are the usual assortment of articles. As I started to mention, there are several things that I want to talk about that I didn't get to go over last week. It has just been such a crazy time. And where do I start? I'm just going to dive right in. So apparently there were a lot of meteors, asteroids, etc., that were streaking very close to Earth around the time of the assassination attempt on former President Trump. I bring this up just in terms of the craziness of it all and this sense of signs and portents. I'm not drawing any conclusions. This is kind of more of a synchromistic take. And in fact, it was someone who was doing some synchromistic analysis without using that phrase who brought this to my attention. But then besides this near miss with the asteroid, meteor, what have you, and let me see if I can bring up, I'm probably not going to find all of what I was looking for. Sorry, I'm a little less prepared today than normal. But there was a whole slew of headlines, including, let's see, NASA's planetary radar tracks two large asteroid close approaches from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. This was published on July 3rd, nasa.gov. Another irishstar.com, NASA warns that skyscraper-sized asteroid is hurtling towards Earth today. The massive asteroid is one of the largest near-Earth asteroids that NASA has ever tracked. This is again on July 3rd. And then jump forward to July 10th. Statue of Liberty-sized asteroid zooms towards Earth at breakneck speed. NASA issues warning. ET Online, Economic Times.indiatimes.com. And the synopsis of that article reads, NASA has issued a warning about asteroid 2024 MT1, a large object heading towards Earth, Despite its size, about as big as the Statue of Liberty, NASA assures no immediate collision threat. Monitor closely, yada, yada, yada. And then a couple days later, 2 days later, yes, Times of India, NASA warns that a tower-sized 370-foot asteroid is heading towards Earth at a speed of 33,000+ kilometers per hour. Again, timesofIndia.indiatimes.com. And NASA issues sudden warning as 100-foot asteroid races towards Earth at lightning speed from WIOnews.com. And they, in that article, say, quote, a warning was issued by NASA after they spotted a 100-foot asteroid named 2024 NB2, which is about to make an extremely close flyby of Earth on Saturday, July 13th. Another article from livescience.com, rare daylight fireball meteor over New York City created loud boom near Statue of Liberty. This was on the 17th. Reports of a daylight fireball and loud booms across New York City and New Jersey suggest a meteor entered the atmosphere above the city and traveled west at 38,000 miles per hour. Quote, preliminary estimates initially suggested the meteor was traveling northeast and passed over the Statue of Liberty around 11:17 a.m. Eastern Time before disintegrating above Midtown Manhattan. Meteor explodes over New York City after flying 58 times faster than Boeing jet. JPost.com, meteor streaks through sky over Statue of Liberty, New York City. CBSNews.com. And there's conflicting reports as to whether there was really a boom, but people reported the boom. And in fact, so this WHAS11 YouTube channel, Daylight Fireball Meteor may have rattled parts of New York City and New Jersey. NASA says this guy has been on a couple different broadcasts where his office camera caught him getting up from his desk and looking, and he says it rattled the windows. There's others that have been reported that say the same thing. It just the symbolism of all this. That's what I'm getting at, folks. Of this idea of an asteroid, a meteor coming so close, right around the same time as the assassination attempt. And then all the warnings saying a skyscraper-sized object, something also literally they were literally describing in comparison to the size of the Statue of Liberty. And then we hear these reports of literal headlines saying it passed over Midtown Manhattan and or Statue of Liberty. It's just kind of wild. Make of that what you will. And then as if things couldn't get any weirder, and of course, there's been the president dropping out of the race and all that. So there's all the political stuff. But then in terms of just world-ending kind of sensations, you have this CrowdStrike situation, which has an Austin connection because of their headquarters being here. KXAN.com reports national news, what to know about Austin-based cybersecurity company CrowdStrike, and of course them being behind they were behind it. They caused it, right? Whatever. The technological glitch worldwide that just reminds us just how precariously our civilization is. And it just goes on and on. Highlights from the global tech outage, airlines, businesses, and border crossings hit by global tech disruption. That's from Associated Press, APnews.com. Meanwhile, over at CNBC.com, Microsoft CrowdStrike issue causes largest IT outage in history. Just wild stuff, folks. So, and by the way, they may have discovered life on Venus. We'll get to that. That's actually in the Flipboard. Not all these are in the Flipboard. Again, I'll post all the links in the anomalyarchives.org website page for this episode. We no longer post the voluminous links in the description on YouTube or elsewhere. You may see it elsewhere, but anyway. So yes, crazy times, huh? What do you think? Am I wrong for pointing any of this weirdness out? I don't know. I don't think so. So some of the other stuff we haven't gotten to, I don't really want to go into this that much, but remember the UAP Disclosure Act from also called the Schumer Amendment to the NDAA. Well, it's back, and this time it's got a Republican's name at the beginning of it. It's still got Schumer's attached to it. This article over at douglasjohnson.ghost.io, UAP Disclosure Act, the proposed Pentagon/Arrow rewrite of the November 2023 Act, goes into some interesting details about that. I don't really have much to say about that other than, hey, it's good that they're keeping on this and trying to keep pushing it through. I do think it's mostly a good thing. There's certainly some objections to the eminent domain aspects and other issues. And of course, then there's skeptics who just say it's a bunch of hogwash and shouldn't even be taking up valuable legislative time, but I would disagree with them. Jumping again to things that I wanted to talk about last week, but didn't. I was talking about Philip Benbrogno's having been discredited in the UFO scene many years ago, and his reportage and investigation of some UFO sightings along the Hudson Valley near the nuclear power plant there. What I was not able to do at that time was grab my copy of Night Siege, which is by J. Allen Hynek. It was published months after his passing, but with the help of Philip Benbrogno and another researcher whose last name I think was Pratt. And sure enough, there is a chapter in that book that deals with the nuclear power plant sightings. Of course, I'm just seeing the preview version, but I'm curious to learn more about this and see if it jogs any memories of other research into this. Page 159, the next call was one of the most intriguing of all. The caller identified himself as a 35-year-old New York State Power Authority police officer who worked as a security guard at the Indian Point nuclear reactor complex located on the Hudson River. So last week we were talking about an article by Ryan Sprague that was highlighting this case and how interesting it is, and the fact that there were security and radar operators at the facility who both visually saw this object and registered it on radar. Some talk of it being a helicopter, but also described as a large triangular shaped craft. Of course, the Hudson Valley being notorious for the Hudson Valley UFO flap involving a seemingly boomerang or triangular shaped craft, but also being a lot of those sightings absolutely being hoaxes on the part of a gaggle of ultralight flyers. These are these hang gliders, these not lighter than air, but these light hang glider type frame canopy planes. They have very small motors, and of course, usually you would hear them. So unless they're high enough up, I suppose. But that is certainly a subset of the famous Hudson Valley UFO flap sightings. Anyway, I will try to post a link to the Google version of Night Siege book. And, now I've gotten these all out of order. Just a couple of loose ends. Last week when we were talking about Professor Simon's YouTube channel and his reporting on claims of insider knowledge of some independent SETI researchers who claim that as far back as 1999, that SETI at home data that we were crunching on our PCs and our desktops way back in the day actually did yield some information about possible extraterrestrial intelligence, non-human intelligence in the vicinity of Proxima Centauri. And Victor, our volunteer, had brought my attention to this system called Sentient Intelligence Analysis System, which Wikipedia describes as a heavily classified artificial intelligence satellite intelligence analysis system of the United States intelligence community, operated by the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, and developed by their Advanced Systems and Technology Directorate, ASNT, with the United States Air Force's Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Department of Energy's National Laboratories. I look at the camera at the utterance of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base because anybody who's been following the UFO field for any amount of time knows that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base has a long history of being associated with the idea of crash saucers and reverse engineering, a la Hangar 18 and such ideas. Quote, available information describes it as a complex automated system that allows intelligence agencies of the United States and the United States Armed Forces to use artificial satellites in Earth orbit to track in real time any objects detected or photographed, and to automatically repurpose with artificial intelligence and machine learning the tracking of targets, and to even decide which targets are worth tracking. I am not sure if this involves the possibility of near-Earth objects. Probably not. It's probably more for things around the upper atmosphere and the outer, the beginnings of space. Now, this is interesting. Here it says known public records of sentience development programs and process date from 2009 to 2010 onward. NRO emails from 2021 disclosed that the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, which later became the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, was involved with the NRO and the Sentient program. Anyway, there's more there, but if I'd heard about this, I had forgotten, and so thank you, Victor, for reminding me of this. Victor had also brought to my attention, now I think I've lost the page. There it is. Time magazine, time.com, had an article, we're living in a nightmare inside the health crisis of a Texas Bitcoin town. Now, I'm bringing this up in the context of what's now being termed AHI, anomalous health incidents, which is another name for what has previously been described as the Havana syndrome, and which has all the hallmarks, seemingly, of psychotronic warfare, or some kind of advanced either acoustic and or electromagnetic, microwave, even maybe attacks against diplomats and their families, first being reported in connection with Havana, Cuba, but happening all around the world, including here in the United States, including in Washington, D.C., possibly even in the White House. And now this article in Time is not about that, but it's about the horrible negative health effects people are experiencing around these kind of massive Bitcoin mining facilities. This one in Granbury, Texas. And it's an excellent article. I highly recommend it over at time.com. Very long read. But it just goes into all the different health symptoms that adults, children, and their pets are experiencing that have significant health implications. And this weird box keeps showing up in this article. Another interesting aspect of this, Constable John Shirley, a former Oath Keeper who apparently left the organization before January 6th, has been focused on keeping the mine accountable. Shirley takes sound readings near the Wolf Hollow data site on May 20th, 2024, and apparently has been doing this every day. But basically, they're violating the sound ordinances. They're racking up what to them are very minimal fees, and they're still fighting it. It's just a terrible example of people's lives being disrupted by a big corporation that has all the means and power to inflict this kind of terrible price on people's health in the area. I highly recommend you go check out this article over at time.com. We're living in a nightmare inside the health crisis of a Texas Bitcoin town. And it, of course, reminds me of also the mystery hum phenomena, because so many types of acoustic health effects have been known for a long time. And if you've been following the Anomaly Archives and our YouTube channel for a long time, back in 2020, of course, at our Streamathon fundraiser at the end of the year, we had on Steve Kohlhase, and director of the documentary that covers him, that's all about his Kohlhase's investigations of the mystery home. And it just documents the kind of negative impact it can have on people's lives. And sometimes it's not something that everybody hears, and that makes it all the more alienating and harder to prove. One of the best videos, I've promoted this video before, This is not paid promotion. I just think this is a really good, very concise overview of this. It's just over 30 minutes. The controversial sound, only 2% of people hear. And I really, again, would recommend you take a look at that. And of course, more information on the Havana Syndrome. I'm still amassing some more links I need to post to the website, but definitely recommend you check all that out. Oh, I'm jumping around, folks, because there's so much I wanted to cover, and I didn't really get the chance to create a good flow for all of this. So just completely changing subjects here for a second. We've mentioned the CrowdStrike connection to Austin. There's also the weird murderous lake that here in Austin that separates North Austin from South Austin. Now, I'm laughing, but this is not a laughing matter. There have been a number of deaths attributed to drowning in what's called Lady Bird Lake. Apparently, Lady Bird Johnson, LBJ's wife, long maintained that she didn't want anything named after her, but they named this lake after her. It's really just the river that runs through town, and there are dams, so it is more like a lake in certain parts. But there's a certain part right by just west of Interstate 35, where as you cross the river into the downtown area, there is an entertainment district called Rainy Street, where previously this was just a historic, not low income, but a historic old housing district that has since become completely blown up in terms of gentrification or rather high rises for locals. But it's basically like 6th Street, our drinking and music district, only runs more or less north-south instead of east-west, and right along 100 yards or so from Interstate 35. It's right where if you follow that street, it ends, and then the hike and bike trail that surrounds the river, the lake, that is a very popular exercise zone, exists. And hike and bike trail in Austin has long had its share of bad reputations due to high crime, muggings, rape and mayhem, and assaults and so forth. That's mostly not the case anymore. However, there are more and more people being found, particularly young males, being found in the waters there. Anyway, there's at least 4. There's a ton of YouTube videos about this. Most of them are way too sensationalistic and promoting this idea that there is in fact some sort of serial killer, which I highly doubt. The police say there is no serial killer and that it is simply mostly young drunk men who probably stumbled down to the water's edge looking to relieve their bladders and pass out, fall over, and drowned. And that's pretty bad in and of itself. A lot of people have lost children, brothers, husbands, loved ones. But this one at the top from a YouTube channel called That Chapter, which I've watched 1 or 2 things from that fellow before. I haven't finished watching it yet, but immediately I was taken by the fact that he brought up some deaths that go much further back than those usually being covered by this that I had forgotten about. One of which is I will just briefly touch on, is a very bizarre case in which a local Muslim man who was well known for his philanthropy and his activism and his trying to help children in these war-torn areas around the world, and particularly in the Middle East, who was found duct taped and bound with duct tape on his hands and his feet in the lake. And the local law enforcement ruled it suicide. It's a very strange case. Now, this came on the heels of his having been investigated for alleged, I think, money laundering and supporting terrorist networks or something like that. I don't think there was ever any proof to any of that. And family apparently did say that he had been depressed, suicidal, and the law enforcement, as far as I know, has never released the videotapes that they say led them to believe he had done this to himself. Anyway, I don't think I'll be sharing all these videos, but if this interests you, it's out there. You can check it out. It's just another weird connection to Austin. And another reason to bring it up is just that, so Austin is allegedly the location for North America's first ever serial killer, who was called variously the Servant Girl Annihilator. This, of course, happened way hundreds of years ago, but is also not hundreds of years, but a long time ago, and is why there's these local lighting structures called moon towers that are often attributed to having been installed as a result of the fear surrounding these murders by the Servant Girl Annihilator. Now, there's some really well done books out there about that that might also interest you. Okay, back to something a little more interesting or less terrifying. I had last week wanted to mention this article, Think to New Worlds shows Charles Fort's influence on the post-truth era, a complicated legacy. This is over at AIPTcomics.com and was published late last month by Justin Mullis. And really comprehensive review here, really makes me want to read this. I'll read a little bit from it. From the review, anyone who spends time studying the paranormal eventually comes across the name Charles Fort, whose landmark, The Book of the Damned, 1919, constitutes the first work to collectively address anomalies like UFOs, cryptids, poltergeists, spontaneous human combustion, unexplained disappearances, and reports of fish falling from the sky. More recently, scholars have begun to recognize that Fort's work has also been a significant influence on literature and the arts, especially the field of science fiction. The first book to address this, albeit briefly, was Andrew May's Pseudoscience and Science Fiction in 2016, followed by Tanner F. Boyle's more extensive monograph, The Fortean Influence on Science Fiction, 2021. Now, I've mentioned Tanner Boyle before, and I'll be mentioning him again. He's got a great blog called Getting Spooked. I highly recommend. And in fact, several of the other articles I wanted to mention tonight that I don't think I actually brought up for display tonight, but at least two of them are in the Flipboard. Now historian of science Joshua Bluebus, that's B-L-U, next name B-U-H-S, author of Bigfoot, Life and Times of a Legend, 2009, offers his own contribution to this growing body of scholarship with his latest book, Think to New Worlds, The Cultural History of Charles Fort and His Followers, University of Chicago Press, 2024. Boo's aim is to try and make sense out of the notoriously capricious Fort, not by examining the man himself, but his legion of admirers. And this is where it gets really interesting. And I've come across so many references to Forteans and Forteanism over the years, often said in disdain, in a way like, oh, those damned Forteans. And one starts to get the sense that maybe Forteans have and maybe still are considered trollish, malcontents. As Buzz demonstrates in the meticulously researched Think to New Worlds, Fort was always popular with those attuned to the arts. Turn-of-the-century American novelist Theodore Dreiser was an early patron of his, and Academy Award-winning screenwriter Ben Hetch declared himself, quote, the first disciple of Charles Fort. Actor and writer Tiffany Thayer started the Fortean Society and published its official journal, Doubt, where he preached a radical form of epistemological agnosticism, which included skepticism about the reality of atomic bombs, satellites, and the efficacy of vaccines. But Fort proved the most influential among the early pioneers of science fiction. The first magazine dedicated to the genre, Amazing Stories, included George Allen England's overtly Fortean short story, The Thing from Outside, 1926, in its debut issue. The magazine's editor, Ray Palmer, would later champion the Hollow Earth mysteries of Richard Shaver in the pages of Amazing, and the flying saucer sightings of Kenneth Arnold in his other magazine, Fate. Yet another sci-fi publication, Astounding Stories, serialized Fort's second book of paranormal mysteries, Low, in 1934. Goes on to give some other great references that you might want to check out. You'll see a variety of names there, from H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, and Robert Barber Johnson. And let's see, Johnson started his own branch of the Fortean Society in the San Francisco Bay Area called Chapter 2, which Thayer, the guy who founded the one on the East Coast, disavowed. And pioneering British sci-fi writer Eric Frank Russell drew on Fort's speculations about extraterrestrials for his story, The Sinister Barrier, 1939, which was published in Unknown, a sci-fi magazine edited by John W. Campbell, who advised budding sci-fi writers to read Fort. Now, it goes on and on and on. There's some just great information here that if you aren't familiar with Fort and how influential he's been, I definitely recommend you check this out. It reminds me also of cyberpunk writer William Gibson, who I had the chance to ask at a book signing here in Austin when he was at Book People. I said to him, "Are you now, or have you ever been a Fortean?" And he said, "Yes, of course," and then proceeded to explain to the audience, who likely did not know what the hell we were talking about Charles Fort. Well, moving right along. So some of the other things that we didn't get to that I wanted to last week is this latest. Actually, it's not the latest. Every Monday, I think, is when Micah Hanks releases his latest show, which you can find over at micahhanks.com, and his July 17th podcast and radio show, The Roswell Material, Oak Ridge and Arrow Analyze Art's Parts. Okay, do y'all remember Art's Parts? If you're a Coast to Coast AM Art Bell fan, you probably remember the famous incident whereby a listener sent to Art Bell some alleged crashed UFO material, which then got passed on to Linda Moulton Howe and some other people, and which then eventually, more recently, made it into the hands of Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy of Arts and Entertainment, and which then they entered into a contract with the Army to analyze these metamaterials, which have also been amassed by NIDS 2.0, the Bob Bigelow organization. And Arrow just recently released a analysis of that material, saying, nothing special here, nothing to see here, move along, unsurprisingly. What I was not aware of was, and Micah Hanks in this podcast made me aware of this, that Travis Taylor, the Southern accented, what is he? Let's see. An American scientist, engineer, science fiction writer, and the star of National Geographic Channel's Rocket City Rednecks, which aired from 2011 to 2013. Has written numerous technical papers, science fiction novels, and 2 textbooks. Of course, you probably know him more recently from the Skinwalker Ranch television series and his wonderful twang. He's appeared in television documentaries, including NGC's When Aliens Attack, and is one of the primary investigative scientists on History Channel's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. He also apparently ended up having been part of the UAP task force, but according to Micah Hanks, quoting Linda Moulton Howe, Travis Taylor had looked at some of these Art's Parts samples sometime back, I think pre-2004, which just brought me into mind to realize that how long he's been possibly involved with the UFO UAP scene. It's maybe not so surprising then that he's so active now in the last few years in that both the public and private side, or the governmental research side of it and the public side, or the commercial side of it, with quote unquote reality TV shows like Skinwalker Ranch. Okay. Now, about a few days ago, switching gears, I became aware of my friend Christopher Jordan's Curious Realm podcast having done a show where he had on two guests, Kathleen Marden and Earl Grey Anderson, to talk about and respond to the claims of Stephen Greer about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. And what I was not able to easily immediately find, but thankfully Chris pointed me in the right direction, was the original statement that Greer made about this. Now, if you're familiar with Greer, you know that he is one of these people who strongly believes that, and has been saying for a very long time, that the aliens are benevolent, and any reports of negative alien encounters, specifically alien abductions, are the work of humans. That they are some kind of staged events, and so that's not really news. But to my knowledge, in all these years, last few decades that Greer has been saying this, he's never, to my knowledge, though he probably has, said specifically about the Betty and Barney Hill case. I'm going to have to see if I can redo this here and try and play just a few moments of this interview, which is from June 13th of last month. Top secret UFO documents exposed. The greatest reveal and disclosure ever! Exclamation point. Dr. Greer. And you probably can't see. Let's see if I can get this. And hopefully this will play audio.
These maestros of deception can then manipulate the public or the Congress. So that gets into this whole other category. There's a whole category in there about staged alien abductions and a covert program staging events. Now, all the way back to Betty and Barney Hill. Everybody thinks that was way before we could have hoaxed anything like that. They are wrong. By the late 1950s and early 60s, it's because they want to create the psychological effect of fear of anything alien, because their long-term agenda is to have a sort of military unified world that's militaristic, poised against the ETs. And since the ETs obviously aren't hostile, or they would have shut us down by now, they have to create a false flag of operations. And people say, when is that going to happen? I said, well, it started happening in the 1950s. And that's where you get into a deep dive into another section, the government documents, where we by the director of the CIA at the time, Walter Bedell Smith. And CIA Director Smith in this states that the psychological warfare value of the UFO issue should be exploited. Fast forward to the mid-'80s, and Dr. Jacques Vallée got a document from the CIA that was talking about how they were staging abductions of peasants in Argentina and Brazil, their word, for its psychological.
Now, I'm no stranger to this idea, and that's one of the reasons why back in the 90s, when I was publishing the zine, it was called ELF, Infested Spaces, Journal of Possible Paradigms. It was exploring the different ideas about the nature of what's behind the UFO phenomena, this idea of electromagnetic induced mind control, psychotronic technologies. And I was well aware of Greer's having a similar take on this, even though I disagree with this whole they're all good aliens and no bad aliens would exist or would do this to us. But Greer has, as far back as I think 1996, he published a paper called Abductions, Not All That Glitters is Gold. I'm going to be posting the link to the archive.org PDF of that. But again, I don't, to my knowledge, he's never really specified the Betty and Barney Hill case as being an example of that, though I have long heard from various people that interpretation, and I don't disagree with the possibility, but it just, as usual, sweep it all so succinctly as being part of that. And the documents he's talking about, they showed whatever document they're allegedly talking about. This isn't it, but there's other documents that have been around. And this one, actually, I'm not exactly sure where I got this, but it's from as far back as 2011. Of course, I'd heard about this before, but it's basically about this guy, Bosko Nedeljkovic, who was claiming to various people that he had worked on one of these projects and that he, in fact, worked on the project down in Brazil. This particular document says the theses: the CIA is engaged in concocted UFO flying saucer events since 1955 with a program called Operation Mirage. Real UFO events have occurred, but hundreds of UFO episodes worldwide have been simulated by the CIA using experimental technologies, mind-altering drugs, and psychological inducements. Persons in the UFO field have been prevented from serious study by subtle and/or extreme CIA measures. Some persons now in the UFO forefront are paid or volunteer CIA operatives. This is, I don't know, it's about 8 pages, not that comprehensive. I don't even remember what the source of this is, other than an old UFO website from back in the day. But yes, I read that same thing that they allude to in Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science Journals, where he talks about that document. And that allegedly may now be in the Rice University archives there in Houston, Texas, which Jacques' collection has like a 10-year moratorium on. So you won't be able to go look at it, at least not for a while. Now, I bring all this up because I find it rather interesting. Let's see, why is this tab? The Newkirks, who have the Haunted Objects podcast and the wonderful community, their paramuseum of occult objects, traveling museum. On episode 2 of season 2 of their Haunted Objects podcast, they cover one of my favorite UFO cases of all time, the Joe Simonton alien pancakes case. Now, this is from, I believe, like 1961. It's just a very strange case of a rural plumber witnessing a craft coming down, and classic saucer shape, and a very human-looking person popping out of the side of it, giving him a jug, acting as if it's for drinking water. He gets some water. They give him. Simonton gives them the water, and he looks inside and he sees somebody grilling what looked like pancakes to him, and they give him some pancakes, some of these little cakes, and this case was investigated by Blue Book and other researchers, and of course a lot of people dismissed it as either a hoax or just the delusions of some rural bumpkin. The poor Joe Simonton did not reap any benefits from this incident. But as usual, the Newkirks over at Planet Weird, their YouTube channel, have come up with some great new information. It's not, refound some old information. Let me see if I can get this to work here. Hopefully the audio still works. And this is their assistant Connor, who also is a great investigator and one of the main people behind the creation of the Estes method, if you are familiar about that in paranormal investigations.
In the for what could have happened to Joe Simonton, and remember, this is about 6 months after the incident occurred, comes from a woman named Cecilia Hess, and Greg has the article right there.
It's called A Re-Examination of the Simonton Case. I'm going to skip to the second half of this article because that's where all the juicy stuff is. The most recent information to come to our attention concerning the Simonton case, we will quote directly from member Cecile Hess of Rhinelander. It is self-explanatory. So this comes from a NICAP member about 25 miles away from Eagle River. 2 weeks ago last night, about 28th of February, Harry Pride, an Eagle River real estate broker, came and sat down next to me in the lounge during our coffee break and asked me what I thought of their advertising stunt. It turned out that he was referring to the Simonton affair. He then proceeded to tell me that he and some friends got Joe drunk and then hypnotized him. He said they had him tell the story 29 times while under hypnosis. I called up Ray Palmer, the editor of Flying Saucers out of Amherst, Wisconsin, that week, and I asked him what he thought about it. He told me he thought Joe had had a psychic experience, that possibly they enlarged on it. He also said that if the hypnotic part of the story was true, that those who did it may have thought that they were doing their patriotic duty, as much as to say that someone had approached them and given them the idea, possibly hinting to them that they might find a use on this amusement ground where Joe was going to sit and tell his story. I met Joe last August at Judge Carter's summer home. If I ever saw a sincere and honest man, it was him. A person had to understand a bit about hypnotism to realize how this could be, and I'm one of those who do know the possibilities inherent in it. A week ago, Harry Pride denied his original story and said Joe suffered from hallucinations and they just used hypnosis to make him tell the story the same each time. I tried to get more out of him last night, but he wasn't talking, unquote.
So essentially, it's insane.
So weird.
The idea is that did you notice another detail in there? They're not saying that it was Harry Pride's idea.
Yeah.
Remember, he's the owner and real estate developer.
And so they go on to suggest or allude to their previous podcast where they reported on the Betty and Barney Hill case. And this idea that the idea for hypnotizing them came from an outside source. Now, I bring all this up because, again, there has long been this idea of a mind control element to the alien abduction phenomena. Another researcher whose essay, white paper, The Controllers Hypothesis by Martin Cannon, became wildly popular. And he has since come out of the woodwork and has started speaking publicly again. Or, well, I don't think he really spoke publicly much at all when he first put that out, The Controllers. And in fact, he eventually disavowed it and tried to get as many copies of it taken off the internet as possible. Did not like the kind of attention it was drawing to him. But that doesn't mean that he disavowed the ideas entirely. But Martin Cannon, in his interviews with Erica Lukes and Jack Brewer and Emily Reeds and others recently, has brought out some information about Betty Hill that, in his mind and the mind of many others, makes it seem quite likely and obvious that they would have possibly been the targets of potential government military intelligence shenanigans. And there's definitely a lot of strange coincidences around their case. I'm not going to go into all those details, but you can find that information at the Expanding Frontiers Research .org website, where at their YouTube channel, where Erica and others have interviewed Martin Cannon and talked about this. But all this is to say, I'm not saying definitively again that any of these cases have been proven to be hoaxes or staged by anybody. It just is interesting to entertain these other possibilities with all the other possibilities. Moving right along. Yeah, we do have information about why is this? Let's see. Is that working now? There's over at the Anomaly-Archives.org. We have a nice page with lots of great information about Betty and Barney Hill, including, as I've frequently mentioned recently, Professor Wham's presentation, Aliens or Alienated Hidden Assumptions About Race That Persist in Paranormal Cultures. And I think I even linked to the other Haunted Objects podcast that dealt with them. And there's a lot of great footage of Betty and Barney Hill being interviewed, as well as Barney Hill's wonderful appearance on the TV show To Tell the Truth. Well, what else? I did want to. I only just became aware of Michael Heiser. Was a skeptic and some would say a debunker he specifically tried to expose the misinterpretations of Zecharia Sitchin. I met Michael in 2017 when the first and only time I've gone to Roswell for the anniversary and all the different wonderful conferences there. I had a great time. He was being presented as part of the conference put on by Guy Malone, one of the 4 different conferences, or maybe even 5 conferences I went to there in Roswell that year. And I only just found out that he passed away early last year. He was a Bible scholar and wrote about these apparent misinterpretations. He was very critical of the whole Ancient Aliens commercialism and misinformation. And while I didn't know him very personally, I had started carrying his podcast on the Anomaly Radio Network that I've been running as a hobby forever, unaffiliated with the Anomaly Archives. But sad to see news that he had passed. But folks, you can go over to our Flipboard and get all kinds of. Is it not? All kinds of other links and information, like to several of the articles that I was mentioning tonight. Here are 2 of the Tanner Boyle articles I most recently read that I was alluding to: Close Encounters with the Far Right in Paranormal Spaces, as well as Forbidden Science Dispatches number 6. He's been chronicling different aspects of the information provided by Jacques Vallée in his fantastic Forbidden Science journals. Hope you'll check all that out. Oh, there is a sneak peek of Lou Elizondo's new book, Imminent, available through Google Books. And I mentioned something about discovery of alien life or possibilities. Yes, signs of 2 gases in clouds of Venus could indicate life, scientists say. This is The Guardian from a few days ago. And all kinds of great stuff over there. Folks, today has been one of those days where some friends and family are dealing with health issues, and thankfully that's all gone really well as far as I know. And I hope you are in good health, and I hope all of your loved ones are in good health, and I hope we all move into a better, brighter future for humanity and for all life on this planet. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.